In a quiet corner of the city, where flowers bloom but dreams often wither, lives Elio, a humble florist barely making ends meet. His days are steeped in petals and perfume, yet his world feels colorless until the moment a rain-soaked stranger walks into his shop. She's quiet, lost, and beautiful in a way that speaks of both elegance and pain. Elio gives her his last rose, not knowing it's not just any stranger, it's Lana Halberd, the runaway heiress who just canceled the wedding of the decade. What begins as a single act of kindness blossoms into an unexpected connection between two souls from opposite worlds. As Lana hides from the tabloid storm and Elio clings to the roots of his struggling shop, their growing bond is tested by secrets, family ultimatums, and a society that says they don't belong together. But love, like flowers, grows wild when given the chance. And this rose was never meant to wilt. This is a story of chance, courage, and the kind of love that dares to bloom in broken places. She ran from a life of diamonds. He offered her a flower. And it just might be enough to change everything. The scent of wilting roses lingered in the air, sweet and tired. Elio's flower shop sat nestled between a shuttered tailor and a bakery that smelled better than business allowed. He had long stopped keeping track of how many months the for lease signs hung on the windows of his neighbors. What mattered was that Elio's Florals and Greens still had its door open. Barely. The morning had started like most others, a too-thin cup of instant coffee, hands cold from the faucet, and the quiet hum of the city trying to wake up. The bell above the shop's front door gave a hopeful chime every time someone walked by, but it rarely rang for entry. Elio worked alone. His fingers were perpetually stained with chlorophyll and dusted with pollen, and the apron he wore bore the battle scars of a man too proud to close shop, too stubborn to ask for help. He arranged a bouquet of peonies and lilies with the precision of an artist and the melancholy of a man who'd arranged too many farewell flowers. Outside, clouds gathered like an approaching truth. Rain was always bad for business, but it suited Elio's mood just fine. He looked at the inventory, just a few stems left from yesterday's batch. The shop's only delivery truck had broken down earlier that week, and the repair quote still sat unopened in his inbox. He sighed and rearranged the single fresh rose he had left into a modest vase at the front window. Then she appeared. At first he saw only the silhouette, a woman wrapped in a beige coat, the hood drawn over her head like she was hiding from more than just the rain. She paused at the shop's door but didn't enter. Her eyes moved slowly across the flowers inside, pausing on the lone rose in the window before turning away. Elio stepped out from behind the counter. "Need shelter," he called gently, trying not to sound too eager. She froze. After a moment's hesitation, the door creaked open and she stepped inside. Rain beaded down her coat and dripped onto the floor. Her face was pale, lips trembling ever so slightly, not from cold, Elio suspected, but from something deeper. "Sorry," she murmured, voice barely above the hum of the storm outside. "I didn't mean to." "No trouble," Elio said, offering a disarming smile. "You looked like you needed something beautiful, or at least dry." Her eyes swept the shop again. "It's nice here, peaceful." "That's the hope," he replied. "You caught me at a quiet time." She walked slowly to the counter, trailing her fingers across the tops of sunflowers and irises. "Do you have any roses?" Elio blinked. just one. Bit of an orphan. She looked at it, the last rose, a rich crimson bloom still holding tight to its life. "I'll take it," she said. He hesitated, studying her. There was something about the way she looked at that rose, like it was a lifeline. He picked it up carefully and wrapped it in brown paper, tying a green silk ribbon around the stem. "No charge," he said as he handed it to her. Her eyes snapped up to meet his, stunned. "What?" "Call it a rainy day gift." She blinked quickly, and Elio realized she might cry. But instead, she nodded and tucked the rose to her chest, like it meant more than he could know. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means." Before he could respond, she turned and left. The door chimed as it closed behind her, and through the rain-fogged glass, Elio watched her disappear into the city, like a ghost. He stood there for a long time. It wasn't until hours later, when he was wiping down the counters and the evening news played on the tiny radio in the back room, that he heard the name Lana Halberd. "Billionaire heiress vanishes minutes before her wedding," the announcer said, his voice laced with drama. Fiancé and family left reeling, rumors swirl of a secret escape, more at 8. Elio froze. On the screen they flashed a photo of Lana in her wedding dress stepping out of a limousine. It was the same woman, the same eyes, the same quiet sorrow. And she had his last rose. He didn't know her name when she walked in, but somehow he knew. He'd just given something precious to someone on the edge of everything. And his quiet life had just shifted, slightly, irrevocably. Rain tapped rhythmically on the glass as the sky faded into dusk. The city lit up in fractured patterns, headlights, neon signs, the golden hue of apartment windows glowing like distant lanterns. But Elio's mind remained fixed on a single memory. Her eyes, that look of silent desperation, of a storm raging behind restraint. He replayed it again and again, that brief exchange, the quiet gratitude in her voice, the way her fingers trembled when she held the rose. Her face in the news was the same but different, flanked by flashes of cameras, her smile forced, polished. In his shop she had looked like a version of herself no one had seen before, real. Elio wasn't sure why it stirred something in him. Maybe it was the contrast, how a person born into gold could carry such weight in her gaze. Or maybe it was because she had chosen his shop, his last rose. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving puddles like fallen mirrors on the streets. The air felt freshly broken, a breath after a scream. Across town, Lana Halberd, curled in a coat too thin for the night air, huddled in the back corner of a mid-range hotel. The room was small but clean, devoid of grandeur, nothing like the estate she'd fled. A folded wedding dress lay draped over the armchair, the veil spilling onto the floor like a ghost. The rose sat in a plastic cup beside the bed, the brown paper still damp from the rain. Lana stared at it as if it held all the answers. The florist hadn't asked her name, hadn't looked at her like a runaway or a news scandal, or a daughter who had disappointed the dynasty. He'd looked at her like a person, just a woman on a rainy day, and he'd offered her something freely, with no expectation, a gift. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had given her something without strings. She touched the bloom gently, the soft velvet of the petals almost startling. Her engagement ring still sat in her coat pocket, forgotten. The man she was meant to marry, Cameron Vale, was likely throwing a tantrum somewhere in a hotel penthouse, embarrassed that she'd ruined his photo-op wedding. Good, she thought, let him be embarrassed. Let the whole world know she wasn't property to be displayed. She was tired of the curated illusion, her father's vision of the perfect daughter, the flawless bride, the silent heiress, the quiet prisoner. Now, for the first time in her adult life, Lana had no plan, only a rose, only a memory of a man who asked nothing of her but her truth. She took a breath. Tomorrow, she decided, she'd go back to the flower shop just once. The headlines exploded by morning. Heiress Halberd vanishes before wedding of the century, groom left at the altar. Runaway heiress Lana Halberd breaks silence by not speaking. 14 million wedding cancelled with a whisper. In the upper floors of Halberd International's private tower, Gregory Halberd seethed behind his desk. A titan of real estate, politics, and public appearances, he had spent the last 20 years turning his family into a brand. Now one wayward daughter had undone it all with a single act of defiance. "Find her," he barked at his eldest son, Harlan. "I want her back now, quietly." Harlan, sharply dressed and unflinchingly loyal to the empire, nodded once. "And if she doesn't want to come?" "Convince her," Gregory snapped. "She doesn't get to disappear, not now." Meanwhile, in Elio's flower shop, the world continued at its unhurried pace. He avoided the news as best he could, though her face was everywhere. Billboards, bus stops, even his customers whispered her name. "She must be mad," said one woman as she sniffed a bundle of tulips. "Throwing away a life like that, rich, beautiful, practically royalty." Elio forced a neutral smile. "Sometimes freedom's more expensive than diamonds." She laughed, not understanding. But Elio couldn't forget her, the weight she'd carried in her silence, the fragility behind her strength. He found himself replaying every second, the way she looked at that rose, the tremble in her lips, the sense that she'd come to the shop for something more than flowers. Then, just before closing that evening, the door chimed. He looked up, and there she was. No makeup, no entourage, no veil, just Lana. Rain-dampened hair clung to her cheeks, and she clutched her coat like armor. Her eyes met his, uncertain. I wasn't sure if you'd remember me," she said. "I remember," he said, his voice quiet. She took a step forward. "I wanted to thank you for the rose. It meant more than you know." He studied her face, saw the exhaustion behind her defiance. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Number, but I'm not pretending anymore." There was silence, soft, sincere, and in it something new began to bloom. Not quite love, not yet trust, but perhaps the roots of both. Elio watched Lana as if he was afraid she might disappear again. She stood in the middle of his modest shop, a place that smelled like spring even in the dead of winter. Outside, the streets glistened with remnants of rain. Inside, it was quiet, like the world had paused to let her speak. "I didn't plan on coming back," she said softly, her eyes tracing the rows of hydrangeas and baby's breath. "But I couldn't stop thinking about it, about this place, about the rose." He tilted his head slightly, curious. "It was just a flower." Her gaze flicked to him, sharp and clear. "No, it wasn't." She stepped closer, removing the rose from her coat pocket, still wrapped in the original paper, now dried and creased. It was bruised from time and travel, but not yet dead. I've been carrying it with me, like a reminder that someone saw me, not as a bride or a scandal or an heiress, just as someone sad on a rainy day. Elio didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to his kindness being remembered. "You're welcome to stay," he offered, "for as long as you need." Lana looked at him, her mouth parting slightly, as if the words caught in her throat. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a plan, no money, no place. I've always had someone telling me what to do." Elio nodded slowly. "Then maybe now's the time to tell yourself." She sat down on the wooden bench near the front window, the same place she'd stood the day he met her. "I used to come into flower shops when I was younger," she said almost wistfully. "My mother loved peonies. She said they were brave flowers, soft but not weak." She sounds like she was wise. She was, until my father broke her. Elio said nothing. Some silences are sacred. After a long pause, Lana asked, "Do you need help here?" "I'm not very good at normal life, but I can learn." He raised an eyebrow, trying not to smile. "Can you sweep?" She laughed, small, genuine. "I think so." "Then you're hired." By the end of the week, Lana had become a fixture in the shop, sweeping floors, misting orchids, and arranging bouquets with a kind of reverence. She moved cautiously, as if afraid her presence might crack the delicate rhythm of Elio's life. But to him, her presence added a note of music to what had become monotone. Customers didn't recognize her, disguised by simplicity and stripped of glamour. She wore jeans, tied her hair up, and introduced herself as Elle, a subtle homage to her name, but far enough removed to keep the curious at bay. Elio didn't push. He didn't ask questions about her past. There was an unspoken rule between them. The shop was a sanctuary. Whatever the world whispered outside didn't belong within its walls. But still, Elio wondered. He watched the way she flinched at loud car horns, the way her fingers fidgeted when silence stretched too long. He saw the sadness that lingered even in her laughter. He wanted to know her story, but more than that, he wanted to protect her from needing to tell it. They shared meals sometimes, sandwiches eaten on overturned crates, or tea sipped among crates of tulips. Each moment is quiet but companionable. Once he caught her watching him with something soft in her eyes. He looked away quickly, heart stumbling. "Why flowers?" she asked one night as they packed up. Elio glanced at the roses he was trimming. "They're honest. They don't lie about what they are. They bloom, they fade. That's it." "Sounds sad." "It's not," he replied. "It's real." She thought about that, and for the first time she told him something true. "My name's not Elle." He looked at her steady. "I know." While Elio and Lana carved a quiet existence among the roses, the world outside grew louder. Harlan Halberd stood before his father's desk once more, shoulders stiff under pressure. He'd searched the usual places, fashion districts, boutique hotels, and private estates, but Lana had vanished completely. Gregory Halberd was not a man accustomed to defeat. "She'll surface," he said, voice low with menace. "When she does, we'll remind her who she is." Harlan wanted to protest, but part of him admired her. She'd done what he never could. Walk away. Back at the shop, Lana worked late into the evening, fingers deftly wrapping bouquets for a small wedding order. Ironic, she thought, but poetic. Elio hummed a tune under his breath, moving around her with the comfort of familiarity. He didn't need to tell her she was doing well. She felt it in the way he gave her space, in the way he let her choose the playlist, in the quiet gratitude in his eyes. Yet the guilt lingered. She hadn't told him her real name, not truly, and every day it became harder to come clean. One night while locking up, she caught sight of a newspaper left behind on a bench. Her face was plastered across the front page again, grainy but unmistakable. The caption read, "Still missing. Halberd Heiress, a ghost in plain sight?" She shoved it in her bag before Elio could see. Back at her tiny rented room, she sat in the dark with the paper unfolded in her lap. She traced the photo of her old life and whispered to the rose, still alive in a glass jar by the window, "Just a little longer." The next morning, Lana arrived at the shop earlier than usual. She swept the sidewalk, realigned the chalkboard sign, and watered the potted blooms outside, all before Elio emerged from the back, stretching and bleary-eyed with his coffee in hand. He watched her in silence for a moment. She moved like she belonged there, though he knew she didn't. Or maybe she did now, in ways that mattered more than names or inheritance. "You're ambitious today," he said with a smile. "Trying to earn my keep," she replied, grinning as she tucked a daisy behind her ear. It was moments like that that made it hard for him to remember the world knew her as anything other than Elle. But the truth sat quietly between them, like a third presence neither addressed. He let her pretend. She let him wonder. Inside, the radio hummed softly. The local news segment buzzed in the background as they arranged a funeral wreath, a task they both approached with unspoken reverence. Halberd family remains tight-lipped about the disappearance of their daughter Lana Halberd, the host was saying. The runaway bride has become a symbol of rebellion for some, a scandal for others. Lana stiffened. Her hand hovered mid-air above a lily stem. Elio turned the volume down, pretending not to notice. She looked at him, but he was focused on trimming stems. The silence grew. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. He looked up. "For what?" "For bringing this into your life. For not telling you. For not being honest from the start." Elio studied her, then nodded slowly. "You don't owe me your story. You're not a criminal." "I feel like one," she admitted, "like I'm stealing a life I didn't earn." He put down the shears and stepped closer. "You're living a life, one that's finally yours. That's not theft. That's courage." Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with relief. Still the fear hadn't passed, because Lana knew it was only a matter of time before her past found her. It was a Thursday afternoon when Harlan found her. He arrived with no entourage, no limousine, just a pressed gray jacket and the weary face of a man who had searched too long for someone he didn't fully understand. Lana was trimming roses by the window when the doorbell chimed. She didn't recognize him at first. His suit looked smaller without the family estate behind it. But then their eyes met, and the blood drained from her face. "Lana," he said softly, stepping inside. Elio glanced between them from behind the counter. She straightened, every muscle tensing. "What are you doing here?" "I came alone," Harlan assured her. "Dad doesn't know." How did you find me? I followed a delivery trail, flower trucks, invoices, took a guess. She stepped back. You need to leave. He held up his hands. I'm not here to drag you back. I just wanted to see for myself. Elio approached slowly, unsure what to do. Everything okay? Lana hesitated, then nodded. This is my brother Harlan. Harlan extended a hand. You must be Elio. She told me, well, not much, but enough to know this place matters to her. Elio shook his hand cautiously. I don't want to blow up your life, Harlan said. But Dad's getting desperate. He's already whispering to tabloids, spinning this like a breakdown. I'm not going back, Lana said firmly. I won't. I know. Harlan looked at her, something like admiration in his eyes. And maybe I wish I had the guts to do what you did. Lana blinked, caught off guard. He reached into his coat and handed her a sealed envelope. This is from me, not Dad, just in case you need a way out. She took it slowly. What's in it? A check. Enough to disappear better. Or start over. I'm already starting over, she said, voice steadier than before. Harlan nodded and glanced at Elio. Seems like you picked a decent place to do it. Then he turned and left. No dramatics, no demands, just a brother letting go. That night a storm rolled in. It came fast and loud, thunder growling like a warning, lightning flashing across the sky like jagged memory. Elio stood at the front window watching the downpour soak the street, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. Behind him Lana paced. You think he'll tell them where I am? She asked. No, Elio replied. I saw his eyes. He's not like your father. She paused. I never used to think so, but he changed. Maybe we both did. A loud crack of thunder shook the windows. The lights flickered. Elio stepped away from the glass, frowning. We should check the basement. If the drains clog again... They rushed down to find the water already pooling at the corners, seeping in through the foundation. Without hesitation, Lana grabbed a broom. Tell me what to do. Together they bailed water, scooped, mopped, and laughed. Yes, laughed, when she slipped and knocked over a bucket, splashing them both. I used to be afraid of storms, she said, breathless. You're still afraid, Elio said gently. You just face them anyway. Later, soaked to the skin and sitting on crates in the candlelit dark, Lana looked at him and whispered, Thank you for letting me stay. Elio glanced at her, rain dripping from his hair. You don't need to thank me, he said. You're not a guest anymore. And somewhere outside, past the roar of the storm, the city held its breath as if knowing something important had just quietly begun. Morning arrived with a sun that tried to erase the storm's memory. The streets steamed, puddles drying into mist, and the flower shop, though a little soggy in the corners, still stood. Elio and Lana took inventory side by side, sleeves rolled up, hair tousled from a night of work. Their hands occasionally brushed as they counted salvaged stock. Neither said anything, but both felt the current run through the small contact. When the door chimed, a customer stepped in, a sharply dressed woman holding a phone and an umbrella like weapons. Lana quickly ducked into the back, instincts kicking in. Elio gave no reaction, greeting the customer with a calm that masked his racing pulse. I need an apology bouquet, the woman said without looking up. Something that screams, I know I'm a corporate monster, but I still deserve forgiveness. Got it, Elio replied, already pulling calla lilies and white roses from the fridge. She glanced around the shop. You run this place alone? Mostly, he said, but I get help when I need it. The woman narrowed her eyes at a faint rustle behind the curtain. Elio, Lana's voice came quietly once the woman left. That could have been someone from the press. He shook his head. She just needed flowers. You can't protect me forever. I don't need forever, just long enough for you to stop running. She paused, and for a moment, something like frustration flickered in her. You don't get it, she said. This shop is beautiful, Elio. Peaceful, but I'm still Lana Halberd. That name doesn't disappear, and when the world comes for me again, it's going to knock this place down just to get a better view. He looked at her then. Not afraid, not angry, just steady. Then we build stronger walls, or we go out and meet it together. She stared at him, caught between wanting to believe and being too bruised to risk it. But something in her softened, because no one, not even her brother, had ever offered to stand beside her when the world turned hostile. The next day, Lana took a walk. She needed air and distance, not from Elio, but from herself, from the guilt and fear that still coiled tightly in her chest. She wore sunglasses and a knit cap, blending in with the early morning market crowd. The smell of bread and citrus mingled with fresh soil as flower vendors lined the square. She paused in front of a stall selling wildflowers, messy, radiant things bursting with color and freedom. The vendor, a boy no older than 15, looked up. Morning, he chirped. Pick a favorite. Lana smiled. They're all my favorite. Then you've got good taste, he said, offering her a small bouquet. She reached for her wallet, but he waved her off. First one's free. My mom says flowers are for the soul, not the bank. Her throat tightened at that. Thank you. She turned, and there was Elio. Not following, just there. They stood a moment, wordless, the city humming around them. You followed me? She asked gently. He shook his head. Didn't have to. I shop here every Friday. They both laughed, surprised at the coincidence, or maybe not surprised at all. Walk with me, she asked. They wandered through the market, talking about small things. He told her about a rose that bloomed late last spring. She told him about sneaking into her family's greenhouse as a child to cry where no one would hear. By the time they circled back to the shop, Lana was holding Elio's hand like it had always belonged there. The night air was warm as summer finally began to declare itself. The flower shop, now nearly repaired from the storm's wrath, glowed with the soft light of fairy strings Elio had hung from the ceiling years ago, thinking they might charm more customers. Now they simply cast a romantic haze across the shop's interior. Lana sat on the floor amid buckets of flowers, arranging loose petals into swirling patterns like a meditative ritual. Elio locked the front door and joined her, their knees touching. Do you ever miss anything? She asked suddenly. Like a version of yourself? He considered. I miss the boy who thought saving the shop would fix everything. And did it? Number. But it gave me something worth tending. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. Sometimes I think I miss being someone other people wanted, even if it wasn't real. At least I knew my place. You still know it, he said. It's just changed. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the engagement ring. I never returned it. Elio watched as it sparkled under the warm light. It looked foreign in her hands now, like it belonged to a past version of her. Why not? He asked. Maybe to remind myself of what I escaped, or maybe because I wasn't sure I deserved to leave. He took the ring, set it on the counter beside them. Then let's leave it here. Not as a shameful thing, but like a paperweight, proof that you don't have to carry it anymore. Lana leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat that way for a long time. Eventually she whispered, "What if I'm not the right person for this life either? What if I don't know how to stay?" Elio's voice was calm, sure. Then we take it one day at a time, one bouquet, one root, one bloom. She let out a quiet laugh. Sounds slow. Good things grow slow. And for once, Lana didn't argue, because for the first time in her life, slow sounded like safety, like healing, like love unfolding without force. Days passed in a quiet rhythm. The shop found its pulse again, and so did Elio and Lana, though neither dared speak the word routine aloud, as if naming it might break the spell. Lana was learning not just how to clean clippers or tell a daffodil from a narcissus, but how to move through a life with purpose that wasn't prescribed. Each morning she selected a flower of the day, one bloom to sit by the register, unpriced, a kind of silent ritual. Today it was a coral peony. Soft but stubborn, she said, setting it in a cut glass vase, like a woman trying to figure out who she is. Elio smiled, tying bundles of eucalyptus. You give them personalities now. Don't they already have them? He paused, then nodded. Maybe we just never looked long enough to see it. The conversation drifted into silence, but it was the kind that comforted rather than strained, the kind built slowly, petal by petal, into something more. That evening, after the last customer left, a teenage boy buying daisies for his teacher, Elio stayed behind while Lana swept. You ever think about what's next? He asked suddenly. Lana leaned on the broom. Next, as in when this stops being temporary. The question lingered. I don't know, she admitted. I've never built anything real before. Elio looked up from his work. You are now. She met his gaze, and for the first time she didn't look away. The first true summer heat wave settled in like a heavy quilt. The shop doors stayed propped open to let the air move. On the sidewalk, a crate of sunflowers leaned lazily against the display, yellow heads bobbing with each breeze. Inside, Lana sat behind the counter with a notebook in hand. Elio tilted his head. Writing a memoir already. She laughed. Not quite. I'm making a list. Things I've never done. He leaned on the counter. Give me one. Okay. She flipped to the top. Learned to ride a bike without a butler chasing behind me. True story. Tragic, he said with mock sympathy, and easily fixed. They laughed. He took the notebook gently from her hands and scanned the list. Stayed up all night, kissed someone I chose, worked a job for more than a week, planted something and watched it grow. He tapped one line. You've already done this one. I have? He pointed to, watched something grow. Lana smiled. You mean the rose? He shook his head. I mean you. The words caught her off guard, quiet and real. Later that night, with the shop locked and the city dimmed to a lull, Lana and Elio sat beneath the soft glow of the back-room lantern, sipping wine from mismatched mugs. "Do you miss her?" Lana asked. "Your mother?" "Every day," he said. "She died just after I opened the shop. She loved flowers, said they were stories in bloom. That's beautiful. She used to say, 'You can't force a flower to bloom, Elio. All you can do is keep it warm, keep it fed, and let it decide when it's ready.'" Lana looked down at her mug. "I think I was planted in a glass box. You cracked it. I'm still learning to root." He reached across the table and brushed her hand. "I'll wait," he said. The night carried the weight of that promise, gentle, unhurried, and deeply felt. The first sign something was wrong came with the sound of polished shoes on pavement. Lana was arranging dahlias when the shop door swung open with a jingle too crisp, too precise. She turned and froze. Cameron Vale stood in the doorway, rain-speckled and perfectly pressed. His tailored suit was immaculate, his smile honed to a politician's edge. "Lana," he said, his voice like silk laced with steel. Elio appeared behind her in an instant, hand still clutching a ribbon. "Can I help you?" Cameron didn't look at him. "Private matter." "She's not alone," Elio said flatly. Cameron's eyes flicked to him for the first time, cold, calculating. "So I've read." Lana stepped forward. "What are you doing here?" "Your father sent me," he said. "Or rather, he allowed me the courtesy of trying to salvage what you threw away." "I didn't throw it away. I escaped it." Cameron's jaw clenched, but his tone remained smooth. "I won't argue here. I came to give you a chance. Return with me quietly. Let us handle the narrative. The media is spinning wild stories. You're hurting your family, hurting yourself." Lana glanced at Elio, then back at the man she once nearly married. "I don't want the narrative fixed," she said. "I want it broken. I want out." Cameron took a step forward. "You think this—" he gestured vaguely at the shop. "This is real? You think this is love? You're playing house with a man who sells petals for a living." Elio's face didn't move, but Lana stepped between them. "Don't talk about him like that." Cameron smirked. "So it's true. You've become a cliché." She stood taller. "If it's a cliché to choose freedom over wealth, truth over performance, and a man who sees me over one who sees my father's money, then I'll take it." There was a long, brutal silence. Cameron took a final step back. "Very well. You'll hear from the family lawyer soon." Lana didn't flinch. "Tell them not to bother. I'm not coming back." The door closed behind him, leaving a silence so thick it pressed against the walls. Elio exhaled slowly. "You okay?" Lana nodded. "I am now." He walked toward her, taking her hands in his. "No matter who comes through that door," he said, "you're not alone." And this time, she believed him. The shop was quiet after Cameron left, but not the kind of quiet that comforts. It was a stillness stretched too thin, like the calm before another storm. Lana moved mechanically, sweeping the same patch of floor she'd already cleaned twice. Elio watched her from behind the counter, fingers drumming against the wood. "You didn't tell me he might come," he finally said. She froze. Her shoulders stiffened. Broom halted mid-sweep. "I didn't know he would." "That's not what I asked." Lana turned slowly. "What do you want me to say, Elio?" that I made a mess of everything, that I should have warned you a part of my past might show up at our doorstep in Armani and judgment? Elio kept his voice steady. I want you to say what's true. She dropped the broom with a clatter. The truth is that I don't know how to live like this, honestly, out in the open without masks. I've worn masks my whole life. Do you think I want them to come here? That I wanted to drag you into this? Elio came out from behind the counter, standing just a few feet from her. I don't care about them, I care about you, but I need to know I'm not just a chapter in your rebellion. The words hit like a slap. Lana's breath caught. You think that's what this is? I don't know, he admitted. I just know that when your world collides with mine, people like me usually get hurt. She stared at him, eyes blazing. Then, softer. You already matter too much for this to be temporary. It was the closest either had come to admitting what had been building, but the damage of the moment still hung between them. That night, Lana didn't stay at the shop. She walked the city for hours instead, unsure if she was trying to run or simply feel the ground beneath her feet. The rose on her windowsill, the one he'd given her on that first day, had started to fade, and somehow that felt like a warning. The next morning the skies opened up again. Rain fell in torrents, tapping at the shop's windows like impatient fingers. Thunder rolled through the early light, low and rumbling. Inside, the flower shop felt colder than usual. Elio worked in silence, pruning roses with the focus of someone trying not to think. The bucket beside him overflowed with trimmings, petals like fallen words, things left unsaid. The bell above the door jingled. He looked up, expecting a customer, but it was Lana, soaked from the storm, no umbrella, hair clinging to her cheeks like ink strokes on parchment. You're going to catch pneumonia, he said, not unkindly. I needed to see you. He didn't answer, just waited. She stepped closer, her voice soft. I messed up yesterday, not by keeping secrets, but by thinking I had to carry them alone. Elio's gaze held hers. I was afraid, she continued, that if you saw all of me, the heiress, the family, the mistakes, you'd decide I wasn't worth the trouble. I never said you weren't worth it. I know, that's what scared me. The storm outside raged, but inside something gentler stirred. Elio set the clippers down and stepped toward her, slow and deliberate. He took her hand, cold, damp, shaking slightly, and brought it to his chest. You don't have to do this alone, he said. Lana blinked fast, moisture in her lashes. I've always been alone, even in crowds, even in castles. Then maybe it's time you found shelter. And without asking, without overthinking, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a grand, sweeping moment. It was soft, careful, like two people who knew the value of delicate things. The rain kept falling, but for the first time in days, Lana didn't flinch at the sound of it. They stayed late that night. The rain had slowed to a whisper, and the flower shop glowed with warm light and the low buzz of a vinyl record spinning in the background. Lana moved through the aisles barefoot, collecting broken vases and shifting soggy boxes, while Elio pulled soaked stems from the back fridge. The storm had found its way into the basement again, and they had hours of cleanup ahead. But neither seemed to mind. The labor was rhythmic, and the silence between them was no longer strained. It was filled with comfort, with understanding. I used to think love was all performance, Lana said, wiping down a shelf. Grand gestures, public vows, perfect dresses. Sounds exhausting. It was, but this being here, cleaning up after a mess with someone who doesn't want anything but my company, it feels more real than anything I had before. Elio passed her a towel. Love doesn't need a spotlight, just a steady light. They worked through the night, sharing tea from a thermos and stories neither had told anyone else. Lana spoke of her mother, how she'd grown quiet in the years before her passing, how she used to tell Lana, "You're meant for more than pretty rooms." Elio talked about his first attempt at the shop, how it nearly failed, how he spent a night sleeping in the back room with a dog-eared book on horticulture as a pillow. By dawn, the basement was dry, the shop was organized, and Lana sat on the counter swinging her feet, watching the sun rise over the city skyline. She turned to Elio, smile tired but genuine. "We make a good team." He nodded. "We do." She reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope Harlan had given her. She handed it to Elio. "What's this?" "Seed money," she said. "For the shop. For us. My brother gave it to me in case I wanted to run, but I don't want to run anymore. I want to build something." He hesitated. "I didn't ask for—" "I know, but this isn't about asking. It's about choosing." He took the envelope and placed it gently on the shelf. "No matter what happens," he said, "we choose together." Lana leaned in and kissed him again, this time without fear, and outside, the storm had passed. 3 days after the storm, the shop was in full bloom, literally and metaphorically. The sun seemed to favor the corner street more now, casting golden warmth over Elio's newly cleaned windows. The displays were full, the blooms were fresh, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Lana didn't wake with dread in her chest. She was planting marigolds in the outside boxes when a familiar voice called softly, "Busy morning, I see." She turned, hand still buried in soil. "Harlan." He stood casually, sunglasses in hand, coat folded over his arm. He didn't look like a man sent by a patriarch anymore. He looked like a brother who had made peace with not controlling his sister. Elio emerged from the shop just in time to see the siblings greet one another with a quick hug. "I came to check in," Harlan said. "Not spy, I swear." "I believe you," Lana replied, brushing dirt off her fingers. "Want to come in?" Inside, they sat on overturned crates. Elio brought over 2 mugs of coffee, wary but civil. "I'm not here to pull her away," Harlan said immediately. "Truthfully, I'm kind of proud." That took Lana by surprise. "Of me?" He smiled. "You disappeared with nothing, rebuilt something from scratch, and managed not to end up in a tabloid for over 2 weeks. That's impressive." Elio raised an eyebrow. "Is that your version of a compliment?" Harlan grinned. "Close as I get." Lana leaned forward. "Does he know where I am?" "Not exactly," Harlan replied. "I told him I found you. I didn't say where, and I won't. He's distracted now anyway." Lana blinked. "With what?" "Trying to turn your canceled wedding into a marketing opportunity. He's calling it a rebrand." Harlan rolled his eyes. "You were right to run. He's beyond saving." They all laughed, and for a fleeting moment they felt like 3 people who might have grown up in the same house, but only now, finally, found home. Before leaving, Harlan placed a sleek envelope on the counter. I know you already have the seed money. This is something more. A legal document. Elio frowned. What kind? The deed to this building. I bought it from the landlord. Quietly. It's yours now, both of you. Lana gasped. Harlan. I didn't do it for him, he cut in, nodding at Elio. I did it for you. Lana's voice trembled. Why? Because you finally became the person Mom always hoped you'd be. He kissed her forehead and left, leaving behind more than just paper. He left behind a future. The deed sat in a drawer, but the promise it represented filled every corner of the shop. Lana now walked the aisles like she belonged. She wore aprons that bore smudges of pollen and chalk, her hair tied up in careless buns, and she hummed while watering. Elio loved to watch her when she didn't know he was watching, like she was part of the sunlight, like she had finally learned to exhale. One evening, they found themselves dancing. Not to music, at least not the kind that played on speakers. It started with Lana twisting to place a bouquet in the window, then Elio catching her hand as she spun back. The music was imagined, or maybe it was made from the heartbeat of a life built in tandem. Careful, Lana laughed. I step on toes. Don't care, Elio replied, pulling her close. They moved together among roses and eucalyptus, soft and swaying, the world small and perfect for just that moment. I used to dream of dancing at my wedding, Lana said, cheek against his shoulder, but it never felt like this. Elio held her tighter. That's because no one ever danced with you. They just danced with your last name. She smiled. And you're dancing with who? He met her gaze. With the woman who gave my last rose a reason to bloom. They kissed there, slow and full of gratitude, with petals at their feet like blessings. The original rose, the one Elio had given her on that rainy day, had finally wilted. Its petals browned, curled inward like a sigh, and its stem drooped in surrender. Lana found it in her room the following morning, and for a long time she just stared at it. It had been her companion, her token, her symbol of escape. But now it was time to let go. She carried it to the shop, where Elio was tending the back garden. She knelt in the soil and began to dig. What are you doing? He asked. Planting the past, she said. He crouched beside her, watching as she removed the petals, crushed them into the earth, and gently laid the brittle stem between roots of lavender and thyme. I want to see what grows, she whispered. Together they covered it in dark soil. I have something for you too, Elio said. He stood and disappeared inside the shop, returning with a small wooden box. He handed it to her carefully. Lana opened it and gasped. Inside was a rosebush clipping, young, green, vibrant. It's from the original plant, he explained. The one that gave you that rose. Tears filled her eyes. You kept it alive. I had a feeling we weren't finished with that story. They planted it together, side by side with the withered stem. Death and rebirth in the same soil. And in that moment, it wasn't just a rose taking root. It was them. The summons came by courier, a thick cream envelope with the halberd seal, dropped onto the flower shop counter like a gauntlet. Lana didn't open it right away. She stared at it through most of the afternoon, its elegant handwriting in stark contrast to the earthy chaos of the shop. Elio watched her closely, saying nothing until closing time. The moment the door clicked shut and the closed sign flipped, she finally reached for the envelope. Inside was a letter, formal, cold. Her father's signature bled from the bottom like a scar. Lana, your continued absence damages not only your reputation, but the integrity of our family. You've made your statement. It's time to return and rebuild. If you do not, consider your trust dissolved and your inheritance revoked. Gregory Halberd. Lana folded the letter neatly. Her hands were steady. Her voice, when she spoke, was not. He's cutting me off. Elio approached slowly. Are you okay? She laughed bitterly. I think I'm relieved. Really? She looked up, eyes glassy. Because now I know I was never the daughter, just the investment, and I've officially expired. Elio reached for her hands. You're not what he made you. You're what you choose. She swallowed. Even if I choose a life that scares me, especially then. She pulled away slightly, pacing. He'll come here next, Elio. I know him. He'll show up with cameras or lawyers or threats. And you, your shop, this life, it'll all be collateral. He stepped in her path, blocking her. Then let him come. I'm not scared of your father. I am, she said, voice small. Elio nodded, quiet for a moment. Okay, then we face him, together. The words settled over her like a blanket. He was always doing that, offering comfort without pity, safety without control. And in doing so, he gave her the thing her family never had, a choice. That night, Lana didn't sleep. She sat on the rooftop above the shop with a blanket around her shoulders, watching the moon cast silver light over the garden boxes and trellises. The city below was still, windows glowing like stars at rest. The rose bush clipping they had planted stood proud in the garden bed below, tiny but determined. She thought about how far she'd come and how close she still felt to running. Inside, Elio stirred in his sleep. She had seen the exhaustion in his eyes lately, trying to manage more than just the shop, trying to carry the weight of her world too. What if her presence destroyed the thing he had built? What if, when her father inevitably came knocking, Elio paid the price? By morning, her mind had made a terrible kind of clarity. When Elio entered the kitchen with sleep-tousled hair and 2 mugs of coffee, she was already packed. He stopped cold. What are you doing? I have to go. No, he said instantly. Talk to me. I'm trying to protect you. Don't do that, he said sharply. Don't protect me by leaving me. She walked past him, throat tight. You don't understand. No, you don't understand, he said, grabbing her arm gently. This shop was dying before you walked in. I was dying. You didn't bring trouble here, Lana. You brought me back to life. She turned, tears slipping past her defenses. Then why does it feel like everything good is one signature away from being ruined? Because you've only ever lived under someone else's power, he said. But you're not there anymore. He walked to the counter, picked up the dried rose from her first visit. The petals faded now to antique pink like old paper. You started something when you took this rose. You didn't just run, you grew. She stared at the rose, then back at him. And if I break this? You won't, he said, because you don't have to do it alone. Silence fell between them. Then, finally, she dropped the bag. and she stayed. The next morning, the shop was quieter than usual. Not empty. Customers came and went. But something in the air felt different. Elio noticed first. Lana was there physically, but her mind was elsewhere. Her hands moved slower. Her smile flickered like a candle in the wind. He found her in the back later, sitting on the storage crate, head in her hands. "I'm scared," she admitted. He sat beside her. "Of what?" "That I don't know who I am when I'm not fighting something." He nodded. "Then stop fighting. Start being." "But what if that's not enough?" Elio took a breath. "Then we figure it out together." The bell above the front door chimed again, and Lana stood, swiping her face. "Back to work," she said. But even as they helped customers and trimmed stems, Elio knew what she really needed was something no bouquet could provide. Peace, safety, roots. Late that evening, when the shop closed, Elio returned to the counter and opened the drawer where the deed Harlan had given them rested. He pulled it out and set it on the table between them. "This isn't just paper," he said. "It's proof that we have a place, that you have a home." Lana stared at it. "I've never had a home that wasn't bought or branded," she whispered. "Well," Elio replied gently, "welcome to the one that was built." She looked around the shop, this humble place that had held her grief, her hope, her quiet rebirth. And then she reached out and touched the deed, and for the first time she didn't feel like a visitor. She felt like she belonged. It was a Sunday morning when Elio found Lana in the garden, digging her hands into the earth with a quiet focus. The rose bush they had planted weeks ago had taken root, its stems stretching toward the sun, its leaves glistening with dew. "I thought we'd try adding some lavender," she said without looking up. "Butterflies like it." Elio stepped closer, offering her a second trowel. "Good for calming nerves, too." She glanced up with a small smile. "I could use a bit of that." They worked in companionable silence, pressing new seedlings into the soil, sharing the kind of peace that only comes from doing something slowly and on purpose. "I was thinking," Lana began after a while, "about starting a program." Elio looked over. "What kind of program?" "For women, girls like me, ones who've been shaped by expectations and not love. Maybe even ones trying to start over. I could teach them flower arranging, something small, grounded." Elio's smile grew. "You want to grow more than roses." Lana shrugged, wiping dirt from her cheek. "I want to grow people, like you grew me." The words landed softly like petals. "You don't need my permission," he said, "but you have my help." Later, she typed a mission statement on her old laptop, right beside the blooming rose outside the window. "We are not what they wanted. We are what we choose to grow." She read it aloud, softly, and for the first time in her life, she believed in herself. Days passed. The shop bloomed. Lana's nonprofit idea began to take form, a name, a vision board, and a list of potential donors that she and Elio worked on between deliveries. But the past, as always, lingered in the shadows. One afternoon, the postman dropped a cream-colored envelope through the slot. It bore the halberd crest again. Lana sighed, recognizing her father's signature even before she opened it. This time, the letter was not demanding. It was something stranger. "I will no longer fight your choices, Lana. I see now you will not be bent, but be warned, if you walk away from the halberd name, do not come crawling back when it no longer shelters you. You were raised to lead, not to garden. No warmth, no remorse, just finality. She showed it to Elio later that night, sitting on the floor of the back room, their feet tucked under a blanket. "He thinks this is about gardening," she muttered, "as if I traded boardrooms for bouquets." Elio chuckled softly. "And yet, you've done more here than most executives do in suits." She set the letter aside, then reached into her bag and pulled out a second envelope. Older, worn. "My mother wrote this before she passed," she said. "I never opened it. I was afraid it would be more of the same. Duty, warnings, regret. Do you want to open it now?" She nodded. The letter in soft cursive read, "My Lana, if you're reading this, I hope you've learned to choose for yourself. I hope you've run, walked, flown, anything but stayed caged. You were always wild beneath the silk, and darling, don't let them prune you into something you're not. Love, Mom." Tears slid silently down Lana's face. Elio didn't speak. He simply leaned in and held her, letting the truth settle like fresh soil. That night, they lit a candle for her mother and placed the letter beneath the rose bush in the garden. Not buried, planted. The city's botanical gardens reopened in full bloom, an annual event that had once been Lana's favorite, back when she wore heels and bodyguards and smiled only for press photographers. This time she wore canvas shoes and a sundress, and the only arm she held was Elio's. They wandered through manicured paths, pausing at peonies and orchids, breathing in the peace of a place that existed solely to grow. Elio watched her closely, how she paused to admire thorny stems, how she touched petals like they whispered secrets. "I used to come here to pretend I was free," she said. "Now I come because I am." They sat on a bench beneath an archway of climbing roses. Lana turned to him. "This was where I made the decision to run." Elio raised his eyebrows. "Here." She nodded. "I came 2 days before the wedding. My father didn't know. I sat here and thought, if I could disappear into these flowers, I would." He took her hand. "And now?" She smiled. "Now I want to be planted." He kissed her then, soft, steady, and it didn't feel like running. It felt like staying. They left the gardens as the sun set, the sky painted in strokes of lavender and coral. Elio carried a paper bag of wildflower seeds. "Let's start a new section," he said, "one we grow together from scratch." Lana looked at the seeds, then at him, and for the first time she wasn't just hopeful, she was ready. Elio stood behind the shop's back counter, scanning a list of suppliers when Lana came in, cheeks flushed, breath quick. "I just got off the phone with a woman named Nadia," she said, voice charged with energy. "She's a shelter director downtown. She wants to collaborate with us." Elio looked up, intrigued. "Collaborate how?" "They run a safe housing program for women who left abusive families or marriages. She heard about my nonprofit idea, must have been from Harlan or one of the donors, and wants to offer the flower shop as a job placement site." His smile grew, pride quietly blooming across his face. "Lana, that's amazing." She stepped behind the counter and kissed his cheek. "It's not mine anymore. It's ours." They worked late that night, drafting job descriptions and support plans. The work was quiet but alive, like roots pressing into soil not seen but deeply felt. At some point, Lana paused, watching Elio scribble notes with ink-stained fingers. Her voice came gently. "Do you forgive me?" He looked up, confused. For what? For bringing all this chaos, for almost leaving, for the part of me that still doubts I'm worthy of a place like this. He set the pen down, crossed the space between them, and took her face in his hands. "There's nothing to forgive," he said. "You didn't bring chaos. You brought change, and change grows things." She closed her eyes and leaned into his touch. "I think I'm starting to believe that." "Then that's enough," he said. "For now, that's everything." Outside, the night carried the scent of fresh rain and lavender. The world was quiet again, but this time it was the quiet of something complete. It was a bright afternoon when Lana got down on one knee, not with a diamond, not with a ring, but with a bouquet. They were standing in the back garden, now fully transformed. Wildflowers bloomed in organized chaos. The rose bush they'd planted had its first full blossom. There were stepping stones with quotes etched into them, and a little wooden sign that read, "The Last Rose Garden, Rooted in Rebirth." Elio was bent over a tray of seedlings when Lana cleared her throat. He looked up, amused. "What are you doing?" She held out the bouquet, sunflowers, forget-me-nots, and a single red rose in the center. "I'm asking you something important." He blinked, standing. "Lana!" She smiled. "You gave me my first freedom. Now I want to give you my forever." Elio was still, expression unreadable. "Are you proposing?" "I am," she said. "I don't need a ring. I need you to know that if you'll have me, this life, this garden, this messy reborn version of me, I'm yours." He took the bouquet slowly, reverently. His fingers brushed hers. Then he leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers. "I would have said yes with the weeds," he whispered. "Good," she grinned, "because the bouquet budget is non-existent." They laughed, and it was the kind of laughter that said they had survived something, the kind that blooms after winter has passed. That night they danced in the shop again. No music, just the rhythm of shared breath and footsteps against worn wooden floors. Outside, petals fell from trees like confetti. The grand reopening of the last rose wasn't grand at all. It was quiet, intimate, honest. Friends, regulars, and a few of Lana's new non-profit partners came. No photographers, no velvet ropes, just laughter, lemonade, and the scent of fresh marigolds. The shop had been repainted in soft earth tones, the shelves restocked, and a new glass display case added. Inside it, a preserved version of the very first rose Elio had given Lana, now pressed and framed. Harlan showed up, dressed casually, holding a small box. "For your office," he said, handing it to Lana. She opened it carefully. Inside was a brass nameplate. "Lana Halberd Vale, founder, Roots in Bloom Foundation." She teared up. "You kept the name. It's yours. No one else ever owned it." They hugged, and for the first time in a long time, the Halberd siblings felt like family. Elio spent most of the afternoon arranging wildflowers in bundles for guests to take home, his version of a thank you. At the end of the day, when the shop emptied, Lana stood at the front window with Elio, hands clasped. "We did it," she whispered. No, he said, you did. She turned to him. We planted this together. He nodded. And it bloomed. They looked out at the garden now visible from the front window where the rose bush stood proud beneath the new sign. The last rose, a place to begin again. And just beyond the sign, the first guests of Lana's new program arrived. 2 young women clutching their folders nervously. Lana smiled. Time to open the next door. Elio kissed her hand. After you. Together they walked out to greet them, and the petals fluttered in the wind like applause. The days that followed were filled with new rhythms. Early morning deliveries, laughter echoing from the training room, and the soft hum of fresh starts. The shop had evolved into something more than a place to buy flowers. It had become a sanctuary, a school, a second chance. Lana stood in front of the newly expanded rear annex, where her program, Roots in Bloom, now operated officially. 3 women were at the workbenches, one arranging lilies, another carefully practicing ribbon ties, and the third sketching bouquet concepts in a notebook. Elio leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her beam with pride. You've become a mentor, he said. I'm still learning. That's what makes you a good one. Lana walked over and kissed his cheek. We did this. He nodded. But you planted the first seed. Later that night they sat in the garden beneath a string of soft fairy lights, the sky painted in navy and violet. A picnic blanket was spread out with leftovers, 2 mismatched glasses filled with sparkling cider. Elio reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, not a diamond, a charm, in the shape of a rose. I know you proposed, he said with a grin, but I made something too, a symbol, a promise. Lana took it, heart full. They wrapped themselves in one another as the garden swayed gently around them, together in full bloom. The non-profit grew faster than Lana imagined. In less than 3 months, they were at capacity. Local businesses began reaching out to partners. The press, once scandal-hungry, now praised her transformation. From Runaway Heiress to community hero, one article read. But she paid the headlines no mind. She had her hands full with real people, real stories. One of her graduates had landed a job arranging wedding bouquets. Another now runs a weekly pop-up stand downtown. And each week, Lana kept a rose pinned to her apron, a quiet reminder of how it all began. She stood in the garden one morning, watering the thriving rose bush with a metal can, when a young girl, barely 16, newly enrolled in the program, approached shyly. Miss Lana. Call me Lana, she said gently. The girl held out a folded paper, a poem she'd written about healing. Lana read it slowly. At the end it said, Even a thorn can learn to hold beauty. Lana smiled. That's exactly right. She took one of the blooming roses, clipped it carefully, and handed it to the girl. For tomorrow, she said, because today you're already growing. The girl clutched it to her chest and nodded. And in that moment Lana saw her old self, frightened, lost, clutching a rose like it was the only thing holding her together. But now she was the one handing it forward. The circle had turned. The day of their wedding was nothing like what Lana's family had once planned. It wasn't held in a cathedral or a country estate. There were no guest lists curated for social gain, no silk gowns imported from Europe. Instead, it took place under the arbor in the shop's back garden. The flowers were arranged by the women Lana had trained. The chairs were borrowed. The music was live, played by a high school quartet from the local arts program. Harlan stood at the back, proud and quiet. Lana wore a simple ivory dress and a crown made of wildflowers. Elio wore a linen vest and a rose pinned to his lapel. There was no officiant, just a shared vow beneath the blooming rosebush. "I choose you," Lana said, "not because I need saving, but because you reminded me I could save myself." "I choose you," Elio replied, "not to fix you, but to walk beside you as you keep blooming." The garden fell silent, then erupted in applause. As they kissed, petals floated down like blessings. Later, in the still of evening, Lana stood at the shop window, hand in hand with Elio, and looked out at the life they had grown. Not perfect, but real. Rooted in love, watered by courage, and blooming always toward the light.